Good morning, everybody. We are live Wednesday, December 20th, NFL week number 16, back here for a full preview. We're talking every single side and total for every game on the board coming up in week 16. It's Christmas week. The background's lit up. We got a little festive. The wife did some decorating, and we're good to go. David Rosansky with the question, will Adam have a holiday sweater on? I'm taking the yes at plus 550. I don't think I own a holiday sweater. I owe like 15 versions of the same hoodie that I wear repetitively week after week. So no holiday sweater, but we've got some holiday light up behind us that maybe brings a little bit of festive joy to the NFL preview show here on week 16. Good to have everybody back here in the channel. Looks like everybody's starting to settle in. Just want to remind everybody who's watching this after the fact, if you've tuned in after the live stream, in the timeline down below, you can jump forward to each game that we're talking about. So if you want to get to a specific game, maybe you're watching the Saturday games or the Monday games, you want to jump around, use the timeline down below. You can go to the game you want, get the information you want. We'd love to have you watching the whole thing. But if you want to get the specific game out of the way, you can do so down below. Want to say good morning to everybody here. Ken back for another show. Mia's in for another show. Nat H, good, looking for another live stream. Good to have you back, Nat, for another show. Chris Gray, as always, one of the first people to comment. Matthew, in from over in Scotland. Looking forward to another insightful show. That's fantastic. Hopefully we can deliver the goods on that one. Ron, Ed's bringing up the beaver. Good comment there. Canadian. I have to support the local. Also seeing Murray back for another show. Good to see you, Murray. Hunter from Toronto. Garrett, Rich, and Darren all in for another show. Same thing with Paul getting in at the last second before the buzzer as we get started here for week 16. Want to bring up as well, we did well last week. I'm talking about this specifically, not so much. Don't get me wrong, the results were great too, but 7,645 subscribers, which leaves me at 355 more subscribers needed before the end of the regular season. We're pushing for 8,000 subs by the end of the regular season. 3 more weeks to go. So if you have not already subscribed and you're watching the shows and you're saying, hey, this is pretty useful, this is pretty helpful, I like these shows, I want to see more. Maybe you ended up taking something from the show, making a bet, having success. Down below, the subscribe button is there. You can click the subscribe button. You can also switch the bell icon to all if you like, so you get notifications for when shows like this or anything else that we're doing starts. Trying to get to 8,000. Lots of people, about 45% of people that watch the show are not subscribed. So if you would like to subscribe and help out the channel, down below the subscribe button is available for you to jump in. All right. Couple questions we had from people, just general questions that I want to get to before we get into the games. I'm going to need a lot of help as we go here for a lot of these games with questions, so please keep them coming in the live chat. I don't have a ton of opinions on the card this week. I have a couple stronger ones that we can get to and we'll absolutely talk about, but not as many as last week or the last couple of weeks. So if you have any questions, please get them into the chat. And if I miss them, just remind me. I have 2 screens on the go. I look at the questions, I talk, I try to stay as presentable as possible. So if I miss it, just drop it back in the chat and I'll get to it. Michael starts with, what is the name of this weather report that you refer to on the pod? So I think the most widely looked at Wednesday weather report is the one from Kevin Roth. You can search that on Google and you can pull it up. I say that because although there's a lot of different injury sources, Weather Stem forever used to be really good because they had like bugs on the field. So you would get field level weather. I don't know if the company went out of business or what happened. And so now everyone was using Weather Stem for a long time. Now it's reverted to different like weather analysts. And I would say that Kevin's the leading one in that regard. And the reason I say that is because when he posts his initial report Wednesday morning, within a couple minutes of that, anything that he tags orange or red immediately moves on the market. It's within a couple minutes, but it's pretty impactful, and he's typically pretty good with that. And so that's the one that I reference, and we see it later in the season all the time when weather becomes a big factor, that weather report specifically has a lot of impact. And so that is the one, Michael, that I mentioned a couple times as well. Nat says, if you can remember to indicate which teams are teaser possibilities, that would help me, and probably hundreds of bettors. We'll do my best to do that as well as we go. Let's see what else before we catch up here. Zach says, Adam, when you bet, do you make a game a specific number? And if it's a big difference from the actual spread, you consider betting. Mostly, I would say that there's a disagreement with the number that is currently available in terms of the accuracy of the numbers that I could make the game. In the NFL, I'd say anybody handicapping the NFL and advocating for numbers has it pretty easy because in the most times you're probably going to the nearest key number if you disagree with a game that's currently on the board. Maybe in some rare circumstances, you're going to the other side of a key by a half point. If you're going any further than that, you're probably wrong yourself and you're off in that judgment. And so unlike something like, say, college football, where you may be setting a total blind and you might be off by 7 to 10 points, in the NFL, there's not a huge room for error in terms of a number that you can set. So I don't know if it's necessarily all about just finding a number that's way off. It's more just disagreeing where something is and thinking that the nearest price at the nearest key number should be the case. So yes and no to that regard. But I don't know if there's anybody out there that's making like drastically different NFL numbers to the point spread than what is actually available. I think NFL has become much more of everybody working from the same set of information and just putting it together in a different way to find something original or value that was potentially missed. So I'm not looking at a game and saying, I make this 7, it's 3.5. I'm going to bet the 3.5. It's more so, this is 3.5. Should it be 3 or should it be 6? And what's more likely in handicapping from that direction? Johnny says, very insightful. Great call on that Saints game last week. Love the Rams, Raiders, and Titans this week. Might be in on New England too. Big card for Johnny. A couple more hellos to Matt, OME. We're also seeing Jordan Pagel back in the chat as well. A couple others. Copenhagen, always here too, over from Denmark. Good to see international support here on the show. All right, let's get to it. We'll try to keep it to 3 to 4 minutes per game. Go a little bit more on the games I have a little bit more thoughts on, and get you out of your way here in just over an hour and 10 minutes. As always, keep the questions coming in the comments. Helps me go through this card, especially on a week like this where there's a lot of things priced pretty close to what I would say is correct. Things start off Thursday night football. Saints on the road at the Los Angeles Rams. LA currently a 4-point favorite. Total in this game is 45.5. Total is up from 44.5. Side has been pretty static all week. There was a 3.5 that showed at Chris. That's now back to 4. First thought on this game is a look to the over at 45.5. It is not something that I have acted on yet, something that I'm sort of teetering on the edge of, and I'll tell you why. The AFC specifically has been very good the last couple of weeks with shorter totals, with wild card contending teams playing each other matched up in it. The games have played very differently than what would be expected from season-long numbers for those teams. And we've seen these AFC wild card contending team matchups with shorter totals just fly over the number the last 2 weeks. And I think that is going to be something that continues. We had one example last week in the NFC, which was Green Bay, Tampa Bay. And that game flew over. It went over by the mid-third quarter. This game, I was expecting a shorter number than what opened. I thought this would be on the other side of 44. I actually think that this is close to the right number. I say that for a couple reasons. First of all, Cooper Kupp for the Rams is clearly healthy. He said before the Baltimore game, this was the first time he felt 100% all season. We saw him have a big impact in the Baltimore game. We saw him have a huge impact last week for the Rams as well. And so I think the impact that Cooper Kupp is going to have to the Rams offense is going to be pretty significant down the stretch. On the other side, the Saints get back Chris Olave, which I think is going to be significant to their offense too. Derek Carr had the blow-up game 2 weeks ago where he got into it with the offensive lineman, had a situation where he kind of sorted that out. He comes back against the Giants, mistake-free game. The offense looked pretty good despite not having their best weapon. So now you have a matchup with two offenses that maybe have their ceiling a little bit under-realized. Rams probably priced quite close to it. I think the Saints have an opinion that's sort of relative down on their offense as a whole, mostly because of the Carr stuff. But to me, that sort of both of those offenses in essentially an elimination game, playoff-wise, pretty conducive to points indoors. And what I would say is kind of the third element to this, the Saints defense is potentially quite overrated. The last 2 weeks against Tommy DeVito and Bryce Young, it's been very easy for them. That game against Carolina, they got very fortunate to only allow 6 points. They only forced 1 punt after the midway point in the first quarter, the rest of the game, and held the Panthers to 6. That's an old Saints defense that played really hard and really well at home against a very easy matchup against DeVito. But this, to me, is a much different class of offensive opponent that they're facing in the Rams. So we might see the Saints defense get beat up a little bit here. When Carr has had to chase and come from behind this season, there hasn't been like a drastic increase in pace, but this is kind of what I'm getting at with these playoff contending teams, essentially playing elimination games down the stretch. Like a team like Cleveland has seen their pass rate go through the roof. We saw the Bengals against the Vikings, although it's not the conference matchup. We saw what Cincinnati did when they had to chase. And I think the Saints now with Olave back could fit that role pretty well. So I think we see points in this game. That is the direction I would look. And I think that you can kind of lean on these wild card contending teams playing each other within the conferences, having more points than expected the rest of the way. The one caveat that is I'm putting on this that I'm saying like maybe tap the brakes a little bit is we're at 46, whereas some of these other games we're going to talk about are in the high 30s, low 40s. And so I think this is close to right, but I could only look at the over in this one for sure. Couple questions here. A Hitman is having a phenomenal season on sides and totals. And the fact that his best bets over on the Forward Progress show have fell the way that they have honestly make me feel like really bad for him because he is having a terrific year all around. And it's just been incredibly unlucky how that has fell. So I would call Hitman and ask him who to back more so than looking how to fade. But it's pretty incredible how those best bets have fell for them in that one-off scenario over on the show. So rooting for Hitman to get those best bets going the rest of the way. Patrick, could Cincinnati-Pittsburgh be one of those totals? Totals looks rather low given how Cincy offense looks and how bad both defenses are. Funny you should ask. Here we go. Saturday games. Bengals on the road at the Pittsburgh Steelers. Cincinnati, a 2-point favorite across the board. We are seeing a couple 1.5 show as this morning Jamar Chase was officially ruled out. I guess the official injury designation will come later, but comment was made that he is not going to play in this game. We know for the Pittsburgh Steelers that Mason Rudolph will be starting at quarterback. So that's another QB change for the Steelers. New play caller now into his third quarterback since taking over just less than a month ago. Total in this game is 37, down from 38. So there's the question that Patrick asked. Can Cincinnati-Pittsburgh fit one of these? Both of these teams playing for wild card contention in the AFC. We've seen Bengals games fly over the last couple of weeks. We saw the Steelers get over against the Colts. Perfect example of a team playing at home from behind, needing to speed up. We saw the Colts with Steichen just go with incredible tempo down the stretch to make up that early 2-score deficit against the Steelers. That game had 24 and a half minutes remaining in the game to get 6 more points to go over. Thankfully, it did by the end for everybody who watched the stream last week, but a game that played pretty overish for the first 3 quarters. And so I would say that this game fits that mold and that category, but this one definitely has some caveats. So this is the second divisional matchup that these two teams have played. So it's the rematch. In these rematches within the division, as we've talked about here a lot on the stream, very well-respected kind of historical spot where those games tend to play lower scoring than what you're seeing in the first matchup between divisional opponents. So that rematch always skews under. So that's like kind of caveat number 1. Caveat number 2, Mason Rudolph is worse than Mitchell Trubisky. It's tough to be worse than what we've seen from Mitchell Trubisky the last couple of weeks, but Mason Rudolph is not an upgrade. So that's caveat number 2. Number 3, as I mentioned, Jamar Chase, he is not going to be playing in that game. We saw Browning, his first game, play against the Steelers defense. Browning did not have T. Higgins, and Browning looked really bad. It was the worst that we have seen Jake Browning so far as a starter in the NFL. Now it's a rematch against that same defense, and you take away his better playmaker in Jamar Chase. I think that that's problematic. And so a lot of caveats on this to why this wouldn't be kind of just this blind bet on these wild card teams contending to go over. What I would say in this, if you're looking for reasons to bet the over, you're looking at the short total. Pittsburgh's going to be able to run the ball on Cincinnati. DJ Reader is lost for Cincinnati in the middle of the defensive line. If you read the RAS app on a weekly basis, and this should be on merch, like I should be doing hoodies, never underestimate the importance of a nose tackle. And for Cincinnati, with and without DJ Reader, the splits against the run the last couple of seasons are just significant. It is night and day. And it's a Bengals team that struggles to defend the run as is. And so this could be a spot where Warren or Harris or however the Steelers decide to divvy up the carries could have a very big game running the football and alleviate some of the issues from Mason Rudolph, as well as alleviate some of the issues from these wide receivers for the Steelers, who are just getting absolutely criticized to death on social media because of their lackadaisical effort and lack of blocking downfield and everything that comes with it. And so to me, just because of the way that these games are trending, again, similar to Thursday Night Football, with these two teams in the spot they are within the standings, I would look towards the over. Another one I haven't got in on because I think there's too many caveats here to the under. We think about Thursday Night Football, receivers are getting healthy, receivers are coming back, overrated defenses. This just feels a lot different, where we know the Bengals defense is bad. We're missing key guys on both sides. It's another QB switch. Just a lot going on that gives me some reason to hesitate in this game. I think we still see some Pittsburgh money come into the market the rest of the week, but I don't love the side on the Steelers either in this game. So if you're really believing in the way that these games are playing, you could throw this in, but that's not something that I'm running to bet. Sean Gibbons says, possible get-right game for Pittsburgh's. Lots of rumblings about Tomlin's future. Saw the Patriots respond with the Belichick rumors with a win on TNF. I think that that's going to be something that it has a real element to it in this game for sure. I see the body language of these skill guys on the field for Pittsburgh, and I can't help but wonder if there's something more going on. Like in New England, there were so many guys hurt. It was a broken offense. There were issues. Now it's the Steelers on quarterback number 3. Their top skill guys aren't running down. Like it's really, really weird. And so I think there's something more going on in Pittsburgh than is being spoken about, which gives me hesitation in this spot. But I could certainly see this being a case as well. Michael Berkowitz, Pittsburgh teaser. A pass on the teaser with the Steelers, but it's a clear advantage play through the 3 and the 7. Evan Norton with the Christmas joke. This was inevitable. Probably going to hear this a lot this week. Will he guide the sleigh effectively? There we go. Who else has a question in here? Kenny going to play? So I don't know if this is the case. I've seen rumblings about that. This was the week where he was initially sort of eligible to return off of the injury from speculation. I don't know if I see that. If Pickett is in, pretty easy decision on the over. But my expectation as of Wednesday at 9:18 a.m. Pacific time, knowing what I have seen up to this point, I would expect it to be Mason Rudolph under center. Connor, here's where I think we'll disagree. And I promise Mason is not a downgrade from Mitch. Mitch lacks basic fundamentals. Mason can execute the offense. I agree with the fundamental side on Trubisky. So I have a theory that I've not been able to put numbers to nor prove that goes back to really getting into preseason stuff this season. And it's that these kind of year 6 to 10 QBs that haven't been starters for multiple seasons that we remember as starters years ago, we just respect them much more than what they are. And I really, we're seeing play fall off a cliff for some of these guys. And I don't know what's exactly driving it, the inactivity, the changing in the league. There's some guys that we used to think were serviceable starters or serviceable backups that are now into like this year 6 to 10 range within their career that come in and just look brutal. I think Trubisky fits that. He's falling off his back foot every throw. He's uncomfortable in the pocket. He's not mobile and willing to run anymore. It's just, he was not the same Mitch Trubisky that we have seen. I question his future going forward. I don't think that Mason Rudolph is going to come in and do much different with the state of this offense as a whole. So I really don't think that Mason is an upgrade. Might prove me wrong. Connor, it looks like you're a fan of the team, but I'm on the stance that Mason is a downgrade in this spot. Let's keep going. Night game, Buffalo Bills on the road at the LA Chargers. It is a 12.5-point spread at FanDuel for Buffalo, 11.5 at Chris, 12 at Caesars, and then a split everywhere else in the market between the 11.5 and 12. Total in this game is 44 across the screen, bet up from the opener of 42.5. Chargers were the side for us on Monday. Loved the fact that this game got adjusted up as high as it did to 13.5. There were 14s that showed for about 18 seconds on Monday morning before it was bet back the other way. This is the classic coach fired, GM fired, new interim head coach comes in. You get the bump with Giff Smith. We've seen it 2 other times this season. Both of the teams with the coach being fired responded. This was a Chargers team that on Thursday Night Football had one of the most obvious quits on Brandon Staley that we've ever seen a team have on a coach in game. It was an embarrassment for LA. House was cleaned. Now it's the fresh start. What I like about Giff coming in, a long-term defensive guy, and players speak really highly about him. It reminds me a lot of the Antonio Pierce promotion. You also have Giff knowing that he is not going to be the coach next year. This morning, there was a report that the Chargers have interest in Harbaugh coming from Michigan, right? This is not a long-term thing for Smith. He's not coaching for a future head coaching role in the league. This is him holding the ship over for 3 weeks. It's just getting players to rally around it. And just this is like the game where the Chargers show up out of spite to Brandon Staley after that quit job on Thursday night. And so a big play up spot for the Chargers. What I liked about this a lot was the fact that not only was the loss on Thursday night so embarrassing for the Chargers, but the win for Buffalo on Sunday afternoon was so emphatic that we've seen a 5-point adjustment since the look-ahead line was posted to the reopen. Now, the number has come in a little bit at 12.5, becomes a different bet than 13.5. But if you are looking at this now and you have not taken the Chargers because of what was said on the podcast, and maybe you didn't take them because you weren't a subscriber to the service, you're looking at 12.5 now. Because this is a standalone game on a Saturday night, and it is the Buffalo Bills, and it is a holiday weekend, you're probably going to see this react in a similar manner to what you see on Thanksgiving games with the late standalone spots where the favorites get bet up. There's not going to be a big appetite from the average player looking to play the Chargers in this game. So you might get this pushed up to 12.5 across the market. We saw a clear buy on the Bills at 10.5, but you have all this money at 13.5 and 14. So the number is going to live within there, but maybe you can wait a little bit and see a 13 or 13.5. But for me in this game, the Chargers are absolutely the side. See if 14 was grabbed on Sunday night. I think that that's a great bet. Fact of the matter, got 13.5. I think that that's excellent as well. To me, this is a spot where you play the Chargers or you play nothing. And if we want to put it to like a market ratings context, if we think about where these two teams were, even post Justin Herbert injury, the difference between these two teams based on closing lines all season compared to final scores within market ratings, no opinion based, no subjectivity put into it. Just here's what the market said at close. Here's what the final scores were. What's the difference? How do we rate these teams? The biggest difference you saw between these two teams all season, even post Herbert injury, was right around 5 points. And you think about the high and lows that we did for the first 13 weeks here on the stream. Lots of people are like, the Chargers are 10th, the Chargers are 11th. Like, what's going on? Like, that's surprising to me. Now the Chargers are at the very bottom. So, I mean, this is a massive, massive, massive late season adjustment against the Chargers that have brought them down, which to me has just gone too low. And so this to me, Chargers are nothing. But if you're looking at like 11.5 or 12, just wait. Hold on. You're probably going to see a 13 back in the market, or maybe you get 13 minus 15 instead of going in with a 12 or 11.5 right now. Let's get to the Sunday card. Starts off with a thriller. The Colts at our beloved Atlanta Falcons. Atlanta, a 1-point favorite at home with the season on the line. Total in this game, 44.5. The Wallflowers wrote the song One Headlight. A lot of comparisons between that song and the lyrics to anyone who has an Atlanta Falcons futures wager on the over 8.5 win total. Down to about half a headlight at this point. They have to win out After somehow squandering another game last week to the Carolina Panthers in the rain, the Atlanta Falcons will look to Taylor Heineke. And it went from we're not sure on Monday to let's start Heineke early Tuesday morning to now this morning, Arthur Smith saying Heineke is going to be the starter the rest of the season. We're not going back to Ritter unless we have to. So if that is the case, and there's this switch in the offensive mentality, you're getting the all-in effort or nothing here from the Falcons at home with the season on the line. This is do or die, not only for the team, this is do or die for Arthur Smith, as now Blank is in the news talking about he's uncertain about the future of Arthur Smith. If Arthur Smith loses this one, I'm not sure his dad's money can buy his way out of this in this particular spot. This is a must-have it for Atlanta and a spot where I'd be pretty comfortable taking them in this game. You look at the money line right now, minus 120. I think that's a good look. The Colts are likely to have Zach Moss back in the backfield. There's uncertainty still about Jonathan Taylor, and I think there's serious uncertainty about Pittman as well, who's been just an absolute workhorse for them at wide receiver. Here's how I look at this game as a whole. When Heineke was starting for the Falcons, Bijan saw his usage go up quite a lot. He got a lot of carries in those games that Heineke was throwing. But this is a spot where the Falcons are going to be able to run the football. If you get that 13-14% run over expectation rate that Smith has kind of lingered in these annoying games, they're going to be able to run the football on this Colts defense. So that's kind of a bonus. If it becomes a spot where Atlanta gets desperate, they sort of switch and they go to more pass heavy, which has been conducive for better spots for them over the course of the season, they're going to be able to pick on this Colts defense. We saw Drake London go from having a monster game to disappearing, but I think a lot of that was conditions driven. It was a hard game last week to move the football, to throw it. I don't want to give Desmond Ridder and the Falcons offense a pass, but nobody in the league for the most part is having significantly more success than what the Falcons had on offense in those conditions against the Carolina Panthers. And so it's not like they only mustered 7 points. This is a dead team. I don't buy that. I think that was really weather impacted. And so I'm not jumping in on that yet. And I think that it's the Colts coming in who are just down 2 touchdowns to the Steelers and got their way in with third and fourth string running backs moving the football. I think the Colts come in here as the much more overrated team, and I think we're finally seeing a point where the Falcons are worth a buy, and you're not needing them to win by margin. You're needing them to get the game at home against a bad defense, as the Colts have rattled off a couple of wins and got a lot. Now, Matthew brings up a point. Surely the Colts have much more going for them than the Falcons. How can the market say they were pretty much the same? Taylor also back for the Colts. Steichen over Smith every day too. The coaching advantage is significant. There's no question that Shane Steichen is a better coach and a better play caller than Arthur Smith. Nobody's going to debate that. But just spot-wise, to me, this is an easy Atlanta or nothing when you're looking at this. I'll take the Falcons in here as well. Favorite team of his has to be Atlanta. So this was an interesting comment. We obviously had the preseason future over 8.5, but there have been 3 other times that we've been involved with the Falcons all season. All 3 of those have been wins, and there hasn't been a spot being involved with the Falcons now for a couple of weeks. And so Atlanta or nothing for me in this spot. Going to be a tough question, but this to me is an easy look at Atlanta. TJ Nichols brings up a question about last game. I think this is a very fair question. If you know the market is going to act like that for the Chargers, then why release so early? Why not wait for the release? Well, there was already money at 14 coming back in. And so we were looking at 13.5 on Monday morning, and there was a real thought process of, okay, well, let's wait and see if we get 14. It went to 14 at Circa and Chris, and it lasted 18 seconds. And so a lot of times it's not up to us. And if you wait, you're going to be losing more bets than you potentially gain that are good wagers by trying to let things settle, because nobody waits for anybody anymore. There were days 15, 20 years ago that are still talked about and discussed like that's going to be a reality again. The fact is right now, nobody's waiting for anybody. And if we ended up waiting, the Chargers were getting bet at 13.5 regardless. In an ideal world, everybody waits. till Saturday to bet and goes, okay, do you want to go first? I'll go second. Here we go. We'll all go at the same time. It's just not a reality. And so all of those numbers were already being taken on Monday morning because the adjustment was so stark and so obvious that if we would have waited, we're seeing where the market is now. It wasn't just us that played it at 13.5 on Monday. There were bets after that pushed it down as low as 10.5. And so it's really tough now because there's just nobody waiting for anybody. And so Monday morning for an NFL side, you just don't have a lot of wiggle room all the way around. So that's why that went in as it did. And just waiting till the last minute to bet it just was never going to be realistic. I'm saying it is now if you're looking at this to potentially get a 13 back again, but it wasn't going to happen any other way. Okay, so Colts Falcons or nothing for me. Packers on the road at the Carolina Panthers. Green Bay, a 5-point -15 favorite at Chris. 5 flat everywhere else. One exception on the board is FanDuel this morning. 4.5 -15 total in this game is 36.5. So the Packers got bet early. It was a number that was right around 3.5, 4. And you're looking at it after the Packers have another clunker against the Bucs, and you're going, that's a pretty short number when you're looking at it. And so I'm not surprised to see the Packers get bet up. At this number, I'm not going to be involved, but there's no way that I could be laying the points with the Packers in this game, especially without not knowing the status of Christian Watson. His impact to the offense is significant, but we're seeing this offense for Green Bay. I feel like we talk about it every single week. It's such a boom or bust offense that it's incredibly difficult to rate and predict on a weekly basis. And we saw what happened with the Packers pricing after a couple games where everything went well and clicked. And everyone thought Jordan Love was returning, and this was the guy we all thought he was, and he was being built up, and he was this great quarterback. But when you get a couple injuries and things are not clicking for the Packers offense, it looks really, really bad. And so there's no way that I'm comfortable laying this number with the Packers at all. And this is getting to a similar range that we saw the Packers against the Giants on Monday Night Football, which is becoming interesting potentially if this keeps pushing up and gets back towards a 6, for instance. But I think the Packers have real offensive problems. And I think the Panthers' pass defense specifically is a very underrated unit in the league. This is a pass defense that's playing very hard since the coaching change, but also has been just kind of steady, consistent throughout the course of the season. And I don't think it's getting rated to the extent that it deserves because the Panthers have not been in a lot of close games all season. And so it's been a pass defense that's really been put in tough situations all year. And now, for example, against the Falcons last week, weather aided, you can't look at that very much. But in recent weeks, there's signs that this pass defense can play a lot better than it is being rated. And so if you have a struggling Packers offense on one side, and on the other side, you have an underrated pass defense, but you're needing that Packers team to win by margin and cover 5. To me, that's just too much to get to when you're looking at the Packers after this initial wave of money has come in. So it's a stay away game for me and a tough one to look at for sure. Let's get to the next game, one that's much better to talk about. Cleveland Browns on the road at the Houston Texans. Right now, the Cleveland Browns, a 2.5-point favorite. Total in this game is 40.5. So this is my current favorite bet on the board at current prices on Wednesday morning at 9:35 a.m. Pacific time. I like the over in this game. There is a 39.5 at BetOnline. There are 40s elsewhere on the board. We're seeing as high as 40.5 in the market. As mentioned, the Browns are a 2.5-point favorite. And so the fact that this game came down off of the CJ Stroud news yesterday as much as it did is pretty surprising to me. It was also surprising to me that the 41 and 41.5s it was even 42. I was surprised that those were not getting bet over as well, even with the Stroud uncertainty earlier in the week. And so the fact that this has come down even further to me is pretty surprising. So a couple things working in favor here. First, you have the Cleveland Browns pass rate with Joe Flacco through the roof since he has taken over as the starter. I know that everyone wants to talk about the Browns offensive line injuries and how banged up the team is, but Stefanski's just playing around it. He's getting Flacco in the pocket. He's getting the ball out. They're passing a ton. The offensive line injuries have been the case for a long time. It hasn't mattered. They've been able to throw past it. And I mean, these Browns games are finishing at like 1:40 p.m. in the afternoon. I'm talking Pacific time, because there's just so many plays in these games since Flacco has taken over as the starting quarterback and he's throwing so much. So, I mean, the clock is just barely moving in these games. There has also been a couple games that the Browns have played in recent weeks outdoors in weather against backup quarterbacks that have been priced right around the same range. And not only have those games got over, but now we're seeing this game indoors on the road at Houston on a fast track and not being played outdoors in Cleveland. The last time we saw the Browns in an indoor game with Flacco was the LA game, and it was the same thing. It was moving up and down the field. Second thing that I would point out, the defense for the Browns, I know it's talked about a lot, just way different on the road. Number 1 defense when playing at home, number 31 when playing on the road. At this point, I don't know what it is. It's like a comfort factor because there's not really a logical explanation for why this team and their play falls off so much on the road, but it's significant and it's a big drop off. This is a much worse defense on the road than it is at home. That's just the fact of the matter, and that's what we're looking at. Fact of the matter in the chat as well. But it is what it is. It's a much worse defense and a much overrated defense on the road, and we're getting kind of a suppressed number because of that. You have these two teams in wild card contention in the AFC. All of these matchups are playing way different than what we're seeing as a baseline for both of these teams the last couple of weeks. It's essentially an elimination game as it goes forward within these spots, within the playoff standings. It's a massive game for both teams. So you're getting the full 4 quarters. You're going to get any team trailing, pressing, and you're going to get any team sitting on the lead still pushing as well. So it matters a lot. The Browns defense is down several starters now at this point, especially within the secondary. And with it likely being another Case Keenum game for Houston, you now have that one game sort of off the rack for him, back in the offense, a little bit more comfortable. I think we see him perform much better in week 2 coming off of that win last week. But it's a Houston Texans defense that's also banged up. They just went to overtime last week against the Tennessee Titans within the division to keep the season alive. So to me, it's an over in this game at 40. Would bet that right now if you have not already. Seahawks on the road at the Tennessee Titans. Seattle, 2.5-point favorites across the board. We're seeing 3 even money at Chris. We're seeing 3 even money at Buckeye. We're seeing 3 even money at Bet Online as well. Total in this game, 41.5. The big question mark in me for this game is I have no idea who's starting at quarterback for the Tennessee Titans. I would be shocked if they go to Ryan Tannehill. I get the impression if it's not Will Levis, it's probably going to be Malik Willis. And if it is Malik Willis, I mean, how can you not look at Seattle in this spot? We know Geno's going to be back for Seattle. Here's what, when you watch Malik Willis play, he's being benched in preseason because he's not willing to throw the football. He is going to make this offense so one-dimensional, and it's a dimension that the Titans are typically quite good playing from. But it's not the case now that Derrick Henry is allegedly on his way out. He's not getting volume. He's not getting a lot of touches. I really like Spears, but if it's Malik Willis and Spears driving this offense, you kind of take Hopkins out of the picture because it's just the ball's not going to get to him. And so for a Seahawks team that has a big issue in the secondary, defending passes and trying to figure that out, but does have athleticism and talent to defend the run, I know the stats have looked bad for Seattle. I don't know what's driving that either, despite the talent they have defensively. But if it's Willis under center, it's not going to be a difficult game plan for the Seahawks to put together and try to defend, even if it is the Seahawks on the road laying nearly a field goal on a short week. And so I don't know who's starting at QB. I don't think you're going to get just a massive effort if it is Tannehill, as he had interviews after the benching talking about how he was debating being released or not, or walking away from the team. If it's Willis, you're just not getting a lot from him as a whole. I don't know. This is a really tough spot for me to look at and advocate for Tennessee in any way, but it's tough to get comfortable with Seattle when you don't know who the quarterback is going to be for the Seahawks. And so, yeah, a tough one here. And this is it kind of represents a tough spot for a lot of other games that we're going to get into as we get later into the show as well. This card gets kind of ugly from here on out. Good comment here. Need to get those likes up, everybody. This is great stuff. If you're enjoying it and you like the show, there's a thumbs up button down below. But I also want to remind everybody, the push for 8,000 subscribers is on. There's 300 of you on the live stream right now. I guarantee not all 300 are subscribed to the channel, but you are all watching on the YouTube video in your browser, or you're doing it on your phone. Maybe you're at work. Maybe you're doing something else. Maybe you're out with the dog like you are when you listen to the podcast in the morning. Hit the subscribe button down below. Let's get these numbers up. 7,650. Trying for 8,000 by the end of the show. So if you're watching it and you like the show, please consider subscribing to the channel. A couple comments on this game. Matthew says, Titans must run the ball in this one. Seahawks gave up 178 rushing yards against the Eagles. It's really surprising to me how the Seahawks, with so much name value and talent on defense, have these games where they just throw up clunkers. Now, with all of that said, the Eagles run for 178 yards. What does that get them? 17 points and a loss. Right? And we think about the defensive difference between the Eagles and the Titans. The Titans right now have serious injuries up front. They just released their best run defender in Tart. Simmons, their best defensive lineman, is still hurt. There's injuries up front where you can run on Tennessee. And we know teams have been throwing on Tennessee all season long too. I think it's an easier matchup for the Seahawks against the Titans defense. But even if the Seahawks come out and the Titans go run heavy, and Tennessee puts up 178 running yards on the ground with Willis under center, I don't know what that gets them. I don't even know if that gets them to win either. So, yeah, interesting. But we got to wait for QB news to figure out what's going on there in that game. Just going to catch up on a couple of questions. Circa has Atlanta plus 1,200 to win the division. I don't know how, honestly, from the playoff picture stuff and all the specifics, I keep a track of who's still alive, who's still not, and then there's specifics for games. With the playoff picture this year, I just don't know. In a good year, I don't know. I'm saying that because I don't know what the tiebreaker scenario would be for Atlanta, division or conference-wise, and how that looks. Like, if they win the next three, do they get into the playoffs because they win the next three, or do they need other help? I don't know how to give a good answer to that without knowing the answers to those questions. So I'm not sure if that to me is high or low on the Falcons. Let's see. Zach, did you call the next game up? Not yet. We'll get to the Jags Bucks in just a second. We got a couple more rotation-wise to go through. Washington on the road at the New York Jets. Jets are 3-point favorites, total 37.5. So another game where we don't know who is going to be starting at quarterback for one of the teams. We know Sam Howell will be back for Washington. I don't know who is going to start for the Jets. I am 99% confident it will not be Aaron Rodgers. That's not happening now that the Jets are out of the playoffs. I don't know what Zach Wilson has in mind. He was initially dehydrated for the first injury when he was taken off the field last week against the Dolphins. And then the dehydration turned into a concussion. And then he never came back and was immediately ruled out. So I don't know. And there's not been much said about what is happening with the Jets offense and specifically Zach Wilson. So I have no idea who's starting at quarterback for the Jets in this game. I'm shocked that the Jets defense continues to hang on week after week. Now, they're running to the Dolphins last week, and what was surprising to me, and potentially a sign that things are kind of starting to wean off a little bit, was the Dolphins' offensive line missing several starters. And I know Tua gets the ball out of his hand quick, but now not only are we starting to see some injuries for the Jets up front, but it wasn't really a factor against Tua and this Dolphins offense. So now against Washington, you would expect this Jets defensive front to get to Howell a ton, like we have seen every other team in the league do all season. But I don't know if that's going to be there consistently, because you're starting to see this Jets defense, which has played so hard for 3.5 months now. Now they're out of the playoffs officially. Now it's over. You don't know who's starting at quarterback. The whole Rodgers thing is done with. I don't know what you're getting from the Jets going forward defensively, and I don't know what you're getting from them offensively. And so another game where, again, like there's a lot of games on the boards, and I hate to be indecisive, but I don't know what you're getting from it. If Zach Wilson were to start, you would expect the Jets offense to have success against this Commanders defense. But it's like, how can you confidently lay 3 with a team that struggles to score so much, albeit 1 or 2 games they have got outside this margin and covered, when you don't know who's a quarterback and you don't know what you're getting defensive-wise? I don't know. I would love to fade Washington, who I think is as dead of a team now that the Chargers have cleared house as there is in the NFL. Ron Rivera knows he's on his way out. He has taken over defensive play calling duties. The defense has not responded at all, and that is the guy who's supposed to be in charge of that unit as his specialty, and you're not seeing the response on the field from Washington at all. The Commanders, to me, just a completely dead team in every way that I would love to fade, but I don't know how I can fade them laying 3 when I don't know who's starting at quarterback and I don't know what I'm getting on defense from the Jets. So it's another game where I would say Jets or nothing, but it's very likely to be nothing because I don't know what you're getting from the other side. Lions on the road at the Minnesota Vikings. Detroit 3 -25 at Chris, 3 -20 at FanDuel, -20 or 25 everywhere else on the board. Total in this game is 47 at Chris. We're seeing 47 at Caesars, Buckeye, PPH as well. 46.5 at FanDuel, shaded to the over. Pro money comes into the market on Minnesota earlier in the week at 3.5 or greater. When we think about the matchup in this game, the Lions go from as favorable of an on-field matchup against the Broncos, which everyone on the live stream last week took advantage of. They go from as favorable of a matchup against the Broncos as there is in the NFL, arguably offense versus defense, to what might be one of the most difficult. For those of you who have listened to VSiN for a long time, when I go on, you'll know the Jared Goff betting checklist. 3 steps. Is he on the road? Is he likely to be under pressure? Is he laying points? When Jared Goff fits in to this checklist and all 3 boxes are checked, it's for his career, playing with the Lions or not, also playing with the Rams. His entire career, we've just seen his play fall off a cliff. It is what it is. It is him as a quarterback. The one benefit that he has historically within the spot is this game is indoors. We'll leave that for later. But why that is important to Goff and this Lions offense is it kind of represents exactly what the Vikings defense does and does well. When you think about Goff under pressure, numbers fall off. Brian Flores, highest blitz rate in the NFL. We know that he loves to mix up combinations up front and try to get pressure on the opposing quarterback. Huge staple of the defense from Minnesota, which has been executed very well all season long. The Vikings, behind all of that pressure that they bring, play a lot of zone coverage. And they play a lot of zone coverage that typically we've seen Jared Goff struggle with his career, but we can point to 2 Bears games specifically where similar coverage types within the division that Flores can easily replicate with his guys in the back because it's what he typically plays behind the coverage, has given Goff a lot of trouble too. Goff and this Lions offense, really good against man coverage, really good against teams like the Broncos who play specific styles in the back end that allow them to take advantage of these crossing routes, push downfield, but also sustain a run game. The Vikings defending the run have been trending really well the last 6 weeks too. Detroit had full run assistance that took a lot of pressure off of the Lions offense last week against the Broncos, but also really opened up play action passing, especially on early downs. And once that became apparent, the Lions could not be stopped by the Broncos. And so I look at the Broncos defense and I look at the Vikings defense, and they're just complete polar opposites for how they go and approach and defend opponents. And what the Vikings do is what Goff and the Lions really struggle exploiting. And so I think this is a spot where I totally understand the Vikings money coming into the market, but I have sort of a question mark around if I want to get involved with Nick Mullins against this Lions defense. Now, as we're looking at the Lions defense, it's a very overrated unit mid-season that has now become quite properly rated. CJ Gardner-Johnson and his potential return this week is something I'm keeping an eye on. That would be an enormous boost beyond words to the secondary and the importance that he would bring as a legitimate cover corner in the back end and potentially matching up with a guy like Jefferson and helping out in that regard, or at least eliminating the slot or other positions, right? Having him back would be a significant boost overall. And so I think that matters a ton, his status. But again, it's another game where, like, I get the pro money at 3.5 and higher on the Vikings. I don't want to take 3 with the Lions, but I don't want to go after that pro money has come in and back Mullins here at home against the Lions defense. And so another spot stuck in between. There's a lot of games like this that I think are just, quite frankly, priced right. We saw the initial move. It is now where it is, but I would sort of put the bow on this one as Vikings or nothing. But again, like we're seeing with a lot of these games, very likely a nothing for me. A couple questions in this. Don't forget that Flores has the blueprint to beat Goff. He's beat him with the Pats as DC and Dalton's head coach. There we go. Good point from Chris in this one as well. Mike Durso into the chat. Mike D, good to see you on the live stream. Look at the profile photo. My goodness. For YouTube, nonetheless. Which coach is worse? Here we go. Salah or Rivera? The problem, I'll go Rivera. This is going to sound insensitive. I don't mean it to come off as that. Ron Rivera is just old. I think he's done. At least with Robert Salah, you're getting the motivational element on field. Like, guys really love playing for him. I don't know the last time we've seen a team love playing for Ron Rivera. I can point to a time with the medical stuff, which was obviously similar to Chuck Pagano and everything that went on in Indy, and you saw that with Rivera too. But I mean, man, you just don't get anything out of Ron anymore. And that whole Riverboat moniker is just silly. So in that comparison, I would have to go Robert Salah. But it sucks to say that about Rivera, because like he is a fun guy to listen to out of like the head coaching context when he's doing other interviews elsewhere, and obviously has a serious pedigree within the league. But he's just old and done, quite frankly. That's how I see it overall. David Jackson, damn, missed the beginning, helping my sister. Love the show. Love the simple handicap. Thanks, Adam. Thank you, David, for listening and jumping in on the live stream. Last question on the Lions-Vikings. Patrick says under 47. Interesting. Look, I saw this total and I was like, that feels high initially, was my first impression I said on the podcast. Maybe. Maybe. Good point by Patrick. Okay, Jags on the road at the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. What do we know? Another game where we don't know the status of a quarterback playing in the game. This game is circled across the board. It is not up at Pinnacle. It is not up at Buckeye. Not seeing it at a few other places. It is Bucks, a 1-point favorite where available. Total 43. Fighting a sneeze for another show. See if we make it through without needing to pause the audio. Again, it's tough to act on, right? How do you know what you're getting from Jacksonville if you don't know who is going to be under center? This could very well be a Beathard game. I think there is optimism that Lawrence is going to be able to play and start. I'm thinking back to the Browns game. So Cleveland at home was 3 against Beathard before the news flipped. And then it was Lawrence announced as the starter. It came off of the 3, got to 1.5. The Browns got bet again. That was Jags on the road, outdoors, in weather. Not nearly as applicable in this game. But when I look at the Bucks, I'm not putting them in the same category as the Browns price-wise at home. So if this were to go up further on the announcement that Beathard was going to start because Lawrence could not go because of the concussion, I could only look at Jacksonville in this spot, just considering how the market has shaped up. But we don't, again, it's tough to say anything on the stream Wednesday morning because we just don't know what we're going to get. And so it's another game I have not bet, but it's another game where I could only look Jacksonville or nothing. The one point that I have in my mind that's giving me a little bit of hesitation. So the Bucks have been going through a couple weeks where Vita Vea, William Golston, it's like 750 pounds of man on the defensive line has been hurt at some point, some combination of one or the other or both the last couple of weeks. And it's really hindered the Bucs run defense. They've also been without Neal and Dean and others in the secondary. I got an injury alert coming down the hill walking after I got coffee just before the show that all of those guys were seen back at practice. They played last week for Tampa Bay, but now I think all of those guys are going to be back for the Bucs. And so it's probably a boost for the Buccaneers defense, but I'm not putting that Bucs team on the same level as the Browns were, and I don't think that they should be deserving of the same price. And we're very, very close to that same price if this is going to be a Beathard game. So wait for the announcement and see what happens. And that's really all you can do at this game because it's highly circled anyway. Let's keep going with the Cowboys on the road at the Miami Dolphins into the late afternoon games on Sunday. This is Miami 1.5. Total in this game is 51.5, shaded to the under. So Cowboys get absolutely destroyed and embarrassed by the Buffalo Bills. When I look at that game against Buffalo, we saw the Bills, as we talked about, get the bulk of the upgrade, right? We saw the Bills price skyrocket because there was a lot of pro money on Bills futures and a lot of pro money on the Bills kind of driving that up and tipping like, hey, this is a real team that pros want to be betting on, and that the Bills were kind of undervalued. We saw that kind of be corrected and then some so far this week in terms of how the Bills are being priced against the Chargers, as well as where the Bills went in market ratings and elsewhere. And so what stood out to me with that Buffalo game beyond that was that the Cowboys weren't really downgraded all that much. And I think that the market and those that have the biggest impact in it are giving the Cowboys a bit of a pass for that loss against Buffalo. I really think if the Cowboys would have went into Buffalo and there was not that flu report on Sunday that came from Jay Glazer about how many people were sick, and if there was not similar reports for other teams the last 3 to 4 weeks that have significantly impacted performance, Monday night being a good example too, but this flu thing that's been going around has been very real and has had a very real performance impact on teams. I think the Cowboys are getting a bit of a pass. If there was not that report and the Cowboys went into Buffalo and everyone was healthy and there was no reason to give an excuse and the Bills won 28-21, I think the Cowboys actually would have been downgraded more. And what I find interesting in this game specifically is these are two teams that largely in part have the same criticism about both of them, and that it's when they've stepped up in class, they haven't performed well and beat top opponents. And that's been the criticism of Dallas, strength of schedule. It's been the criticism of Miami, strength of schedule. And now you have both of these teams facing off against each other. When I look at this number, I'm actually quite inclined to look the way of Dallas more so than I am to look the way of Miami. There is, again, as we have with so many of these games, a big caveat. I'll tell you why I look to Dallas first, getting 1.5. I think this is a game where the injuries that have been accumulating for the Dolphins the last couple of weeks get exposed quite a bit. The Dolphins have issues in the defensive backfield, which the Cowboys, with CeeDee Lamb moving them around, can really take advantage of. I think it's a big spot for Dak and Lamb to exploit what's going on within the Miami secondary. So I think that that's a big boost for Dallas overall. I think price-wise, the little adjustment we have seen is in favor of Miami. I think that win for Miami against the Jets looked a lot better than it actually was, which is a weird thing to say when it's 34-0. But I think that there was a bit of kind of a false bump there. And I think also as well, when we think about the offensive line injuries for the Dolphins and how suspect Tua has been to pressure, the Cowboys have a pretty clear path on defense that if they can generate pressure, they can give Tua a lot of problems and really slow down this offense. And so there's a couple paths here for the Cowboys that I like, that I think that they can exploit. Here's the reason why I haven't jumped in and played the Cowboys. As much as I think about this and how now it's like the second big road game for the Cowboys, they get beat up, they get smashed, they come into Miami, and maybe they have things right and all those things I just mentioned. The Dallas Cowboys and Dan Quinn, through 15 weeks, play the highest rate of man coverage in the NFL. If there is an offense that you do not want to play man coverage against, it is the Miami Dolphins, who can absolutely tear that coverage apart. Okay, so now Dan Quinn is going to have to forced into changing how he defends, because I do not believe that Dan Quinn can take this Cowboys defense into Miami, play this league high rate of man coverage, and just go straight up against the Miami Dolphins. I think he's going to get killed if they do that. And part of the problem is these Cowboys corners bite and overplay and gamble as much as any defensive unit in the league. And that's death against Waddle and Hill, right? It's not happening. And so the reason I'm not in on the Cowboys yet is I don't know what Quinn is going to do, because a lot of the pressure that Dallas has generated has been from this man-heavy look, right? It's just lining up on the edge and coming straight at you. It's not like these cleverly schemed coverage pressure runs where different guys. It's not that. It's just this blunt force mass pass rush up at the line of scrimmage and getting to you. And when you're doing that, you kind of have to play man behind it, which is why this Cowboys defense looks as it does. And so I don't know what Dan Quinn is going to do. There's a path here where the Cowboys just get ripped apart defensively, especially if Hankins can't go in the middle, and the Dolphins go from kind of heavy outside zone usage to trying to attack in between the tackles. And there's that run game. And now all of a sudden Dallas has to ease up off the pass rush, and they can't get there off the edge because Miami's running up the middle. And it could get really bad for Dallas in a hurry, but it could also see it getting really bad for Miami in a hurry if that pressure is able to win up front. So there's just a ton of variance within that. And it's such a hard thing to predict. But when you're watching this game on Sunday, that is entirely what is going to decide how this matchup ends up getting played out. And so again, it's another game like so many this week where I wish I could say on the live stream, like, I like this, bet it, like I did with the Cleveland Houston total. I can't get there with a lot of these just because there's a lot going back and forth. And so, Patrick, I do not know Dak's record or performance in cold weather outdoors. This would obviously be different in Miami, which I think is the point that you're making. So, yes, for sure. Mike says, battle of the bullies. Dallas and Miami both love beating bad teams. And that's what makes this kind of an interesting thing, is that angle that so many people have used and we've seen in the market and have impact for a long time. You can't really use it here, right? Because it's the same for both sides. So a good point in that regard for sure. Fact of the matter says Cowboys versus the run and Miami run attack seems too obvious, but so obvious. Know what I mean? I do know what you mean for sure. Morgan says, good to be back. Welcome back to the show. Do we know the status of Miami O-line yet? Just feels like Hill being back is massive. Feels like no one is giving them any respect here. I don't know what the last comment is in terms of the respect or what's being given there. I don't know about that. Hill being back, completely agree. No question about it. Status of the O-line, not yet. Again, part of the downside of doing this Wednesday morning is it's before any injury reports come out. It's still an O-line that I expect to be down multiple starters. But let's see what those injury reports look like. Andrew says, thanks for all your work. Not sure if this was being asked. Just curious, what are the best sites to learn about coverage tendencies and how QBs fare against them? Do you have a reliable source? We pulled it up 2 shows ago. Sports Info Solutions is what I use. It is a paid subscription. It is not a cheap paid subscription, but certainly something that I would recommend if you're looking at next year. They do all the charting, player tracking, have some fantastic data that you can use. So Sports Info Solutions would be number 1. On a lesser extent, if you're looking at more pressure-driven stuff like that, or kind of more tackle percentage stats, things like that, that give you a little bit more insight to defense. The 2 that I would say, Pro Football Reference, you have to go to the team advanced defense section, and you get some good pressure, hurry, sack, missed tackle numbers, things like that at the team level for defenses. And then you can also go to ESPN Next Gen Stats, where you can pair that with time to throw numbers for quarterback passing in their charts. And you can put together some interesting thoughts and looks from that too. I don't know how great it becomes for betting. But I do think in a world where so many people have access to the same info when it comes to betting NFL, you can get to some interesting looks using a lot of that data. So those would be the big sites that I would point out and use. 5 games to go. Cardinals on the road at the Chicago Bears. Chicago a 4-point favorite at Chris, 4.5 at FanDuel Caesars DK Circa Pinnacle. The 4 at Chris for me in this game has been standing out like a sore thumb all week. Chris was the first to go to 4. They have been the ones to hold at 4 the longest. And we have slowly seen across the board things start to trickle down with little bits of money coming in on the Arizona Cardinals, pushing this number down. And so this is a wait it out and see what it gets to. If it comes off of the 4, I would absolutely start to become interested in the Chicago Bears in this game. I would not bet Chicago at 4, but let's see if this comes any lower between now and kickoff. I think the Arizona Cardinals defense is incredibly exploitable. I think Justin Fields is going to have a good game on the ground. I don't know if the injury impact to DJ Moore is as significant as it was initially believed to be. I think if he is able to go in full and be ready for this game, I think he can have a big game against this Cardinals defense as well. And I think defensively for the Bears, the Cardinals are an offense that is in the same sort of weight category where the overrated feel that I get from these Bears defensive numbers that have them top 5 and top 10 in every major category, I don't think that that's a true number when the Bears are put up against decent opponents. I think an opponent like Arizona, this is a spot where Chicago at home, getting Arizona outside of the dome in the bill. I think it's a spot where the Bears defense can play to that level that they're being shown in some of the key stats tables. And you get a pretty good effort from them as well. I think right now at 4, this was a game that was initially at 3, got adjusted up, was as high as 4.5. It's starting to trickle back. I think it's too high or priced right at the moment, whether you're looking at 4. I think 4.5 is pretty fair on this one. So at 4, you're not getting a lot in favor of the Bears. If it comes off of the 4, I would look at Chicago in this game here. How do you feel about the over in this Bears-Cardinals game from David Jackson? No opinion on the total in this game, unfortunately. At 44.5, I think it's priced pretty fair as well. Patriots on the road at the Broncos. There's a question here from Matthew. I'm going to sneak it in. Did you ever think we'd see the day when the Bears would be asked to cover 4 points against anybody? So they've been playing kind of sneaky good football. And that game against the Browns that they threw away, I mean, that was a pretty unthinkable loss for the Bears, the way that game was trending for the majority. And the Bears are a team that have been getting bet by pros that I know, pros that I don't know, that clearly have influence within the market, like the last 4 or 5 weeks. Like there's a lot of love from very respected bettors for the Bears in this market. And so there's really something to it. I do think the defensive numbers are a little bit overblown, but I do think, again, that the Cardinals fit into that sort of weight class that they can defend well. And so, I think the price right now is right, and I hope that more people share the sentiment and we see this number come down and you can take the Bears at a better price later in the week. Adam says, hope everybody here has a very happy holiday season. These Wednesday shows have been getting better and better with all the engagement. Appreciate you all. Appreciate you for bringing that up. Good to see you back for another show, and hope the holiday season for you, Adam, is great down in the warm weather of Arizona. We've got good weather today here in White Rock, British Columbia. It's about 10 degrees Celsius, close to 50 Fahrenheit. Unthinkable weather for me living in Canada in the middle of December. So not nearly Arizona, but I hope you have a great holiday season as well. Catching up with a couple questions. Ricky Stevenson. Let's get to this now. Last week asked me to remind you to discuss reliable sites for betting splits. I only use this info as a data point, but I have a paid subscription. Ricky, you're paying for these. Oh my goodness. Who are you paying, if you don't mind telling me? That's not good. We got to get you off that paid subscription, Ricky. I don't mean that as a bad thing to that business, but nobody should be selling this data. Here's the problem with with this whole concept is you don't know the whole picture because none of these places have cited sources. That's like the big underlying flaw with everything about the public betting percentages is, for example, like let's say there's a popular account that posts from MGM, and okay, you're saying you use Action. Okay, excellent. So the problem with that specifically, right, is the number that's being presented as the public betting split is used by them to represent the market as a whole. And so every time that that's presented, they have team 1 versus team 2. Here's the percentage, and it's pushed to make you believe that if it's 80%, 20%, but the line is doing something else, do you want to be on the 20% if it's coming into 20%, right? Like that's like the main crux of this reverse line movement stuff. The problem is that those percentages are not attached to a specific source of info. If this was, here's the exact betting percentage at this time from straight bets, from parlays, from everything else on these two teams from this specific sports book, then you could kind of make inferences and get to conclusions with it. The problem is when you have like these aggregate sites to put everything together, I guarantee you that if it's a feed from like a book like DK or MGM or whichever one of these books you want to take into, if Chris moves a number right now, if they go on this Bears game, for instance, from -4, if they jump up to -5.5, every other book in the market is going to go and follow them. It's not going to be because of how people were betting at these sports books. And so when you're looking at the line movement that is being sort of enticed and dangled in front of you from these percentage sites representing the market as a whole, it doesn't represent what's actually happening. So not only is it not attached to a source, but so many of these narratives that come up, the MGM account is a perfect example. It's just not true because MGM is just going to move with the influential books on the market. And it's going to lead you to this percentage story that you're trying to tell that just isn't real because MGM is not moving based on how their public splits are. They're moving at what the sports books that matter in the market are moving to as well and staying in line with them. And so these percentages are just leading people to really bad conclusions that they think are true, that have nothing to do with anything. And then you just get all twisted because you get to the point where after using these, you can't comfortably make a bet without looking at these percentages first. And it's a really popular tool because it's something that's easy to understand for bettors. If the percentage is 80% for one team, 20% for the other, and the line went from 3 to 2.5, well, someone's got to know something, right? Or else why would the books move it? The books want 50-50 action. And it's like, no, that couldn't be further from the truth at all. Books don't want that. They don't want that to happen. They want to have the VIG work in their favor over the long term. And a lot of these books are just going to move in line to stay in line with the market. Never mind the fact that the vast majority of money that's being bet at all these places are on parlays, which is never referenced. I mean, it's such this crazy entangled web that has become a reality within the betting space that Ricky, I would very much avoid. Stay away. And like, here's where you get into the problem, right? Like, what if there is no line movement? What would you read into that, if anything? Well, nothing, because Chris, Circa, some key PPH books, Buckeye, like books like this and people that bet into books like that matter. And it's going to have an impact on the straight line. But the point is, if you're looking at some of these other books that represent themselves in these percentages, they're not moving their lines based on those percentages. They're moving their lines to stay in line with what the real sports books that are taking real bets that matter are doing. And that's going to dictate what is moving all the way around. So I'd much rather look at those books than to look at the percentages that are put together by these aggregate sites. That's going to be, it's not helpful and it doesn't get you anywhere. So really be careful with those. And please do not pay for betting split. I mean, man, I know how you got there, but consider elsewhere when you're going from the subscription side. Pats on the road at the Broncos. 6.5 for Denver across the board, total 34. We talked about the weather report that is public, that is published every single Wednesday morning. Everything is calling for this to be a snow game. The problem with snow games is a lot of people think they mean unders, when in reality, they typically mean no impact to scoring. A lot of quarterbacks like the fact that there could be a snow game because it slows down the opposing pass rush. And so in this game, we've seen the total drop from 37 down to 34. There's not going to be wind. There's not going to be rain. There is a good chance we see snow during the game. I don't think that the snow is going to have an impact on how these two teams move the football based on how the forecast sits Wednesday morning. Now, when we look at why this total was coming down, so the Chiefs with Mahomes against the Pats were lined at 37. The Broncos with Russell Wilson opened the week lined against the Pats at 37. You can't take Mahomes and the Chiefs out of a total and put the Broncos in and get the same total. It just that does not compute. So that's why we've seen this total come down. Makes sense for the under. When we think about what the Broncos are doing offensively, they're trying to reduce variance in games as much as possible, especially early on in the first and second quarters. Tons of heavy personnel, tons of running the football, keeping things very conservative play calling wise. They're just trying to get late in the game where the game is still close. When you think about what the Broncos want to do against the Pats, well, there's no element of an explosive play that the Pats can test them with, right? And so it's going to be the Denver Broncos now kind of sitting up front on the Pats, knowing that they're not going to be scared deep. I think Denver is very much going to look to keep things very conservative in this game. With New England not having the explosive element, you start to ask, like, where can the Pats find success? Well, everybody can run the football on the Denver Broncos defense. And so you would expect New England with Zeke to have him as the main focal point of the offense. Jackson is eligible to return for Denver. He is their main guy to cover tight ends. Without him in the lineup, the Broncos have been horrendous defending tight ends. Now with him eligible to return and be back, I think you can see the Broncos have a much better game defending tight ends. Hunter Henry banged up, but the Pats have also relied on tight ends quite a bit in the last couple of weeks with Zappe in the lineup. And so to me, this is a game where both teams can kind of comfortably get what they want. All of that is conducive to the game moving very slow, the game being very low variance, the play clock moving a ton. That's why we've seen the total come down. I've been a little bit surprised to see the Broncos get bet a little bit in this game. They went from 6.5 to 7. At 7, it came back the other way. When I see the Pats and 7 with that defense and a super short total, that to me kind of leads me to like the dog in this game as well. But yeah, it's another game where I think that the price is right. That's kind of how I look at it as a whole. Let's get to the Monday triple header. Raiders on the road at the Chiefs. Kansas City, a 10-point favorite. Total in this game, 41.5. The Raiders looked way better in that 63-21 victory than you could ever imagine a team looking in a 61-point outburst. That was not what the Raiders are as a team. That was the Raiders taking advantage of a Chargers team that absolutely quit on its head coach. And so I don't know what to make of the Raiders at this point for the final 3 weeks of the season. We saw them play some very difficult opponents for a 4-week stretch with Aiden O'Connell under center. In those games, he was quarterback 31 of 32 for starters in the league for EPA per play. And those were top 10 to 12 defenses week after week. Against the Chargers, a bottom 8 defense with their team quitting on their head coach, all of a sudden he was able to move the football. Kind of makes sense. Now it's a divisional rematch on the road in Kansas City against Spags. Top 10 defense for Kansas City here on the field. Do we see the Raiders offense revert back to how it looked in that 4-week window where they were playing competition similar to what they are going to see against Kansas City, especially so now that you're taking the Raiders outdoors on the road at Kansas City in a tough spot on Christmas, right? So that's kind of the long and short of it. I think the answer is yes, and the Raiders look like the struggling offense we saw them for the 4 weeks prior to the Chargers game as they step up in class. I think that they're going to struggle. In terms of the Chiefs, I have no idea what to do with Kansas City on a week-to-week basis. None. I don't know how to approach them from betting sides. I don't know how to approach them from betting totals. And I sure as hell do not know how to approach them from betting on props. And now this week, it's just even a bigger mess. Travis Kelce's not 100%. Pacheco's likely to come back. So what does that do to the backfield shift? Rice is being priced to the moon as the only competent receiver. I don't know. I looked at these final 4 games for Kansas City as a spot where they were just playing to get still a chance at the 1 seed if everything falls around them, but also just kind of get their offense on a respectable track. And that was part of the reason that it kept me off the game last week in New England. It's part of the reason it's going to keep me off them here at home against Las Vegas. I would like to be inclined to bet Kansas City, but quite frankly, I don't know what you're getting from this offense on a week-to-week basis, and it concerns me. And I don't know. So again, I hate to give the cop-out answer, and I feel like I'm doing it a lot here, but this to me is a spot where the Raiders step up in class and struggle offensively. It's not a great defense to begin with. I would think that the Chiefs can exploit it, just like they did after they fell behind against the Raiders in that first game and were unstoppable after the first quarter. Man, I don't know. It would be Kansas City or nothing. It's a cop-out answer, but it's another game this week that I have not got involved with. Giants on the road at the Philadelphia Eagles. You want to talk about another game I'm not getting involved with? Here we go again. Eagles out to a 13-point favorite at Chris. 11.5 or 12, almost everywhere else on the board. That Chris price is even money. Total in this game, 44 down to 42.5. So we saw what the Giants finally look like when they're playing respectable competition. And that was the Saints defense that I think is quite overrated, as we talked about around the Thursday night breakdown. And I mean, New York did nothing offensively all game. And so now the Giants go on the road in the division to play Philadelphia. And similar to the Chiefs game, I look at this and I'm like, I could see the Eagles just killing the Giants. But what are you getting from Philadelphia in the same prospect, right? You have Jalen Hurts post-game after the loss on Monday Night Football saying that the team isn't committed enough. The team is not bought in. So which way does that go? Do you get like a full reset effort for the Eagles now off of that embarrassing loss in a game that is very important to them and heightened and important? Like, does this all of a sudden become like the rallying game for them where they just beat up on a bad team and run them out of the building with now kind of pressure building and your quarterbacks calling out team members, right? Or does this just continue to spiral downward? Like I don't know which way this goes. In the same way, I don't know if the Chiefs offense rights the issues that they're having at receiver. Like, I don't know if this Eagles offense bounces back and has again. Like, there just might be a big underlying flaw within this team. Defensively, you have Matt Patricia as the defensive play caller. As mentioned earlier, they give up 180 yards on the ground. They only end up conceding that late drive. Otherwise, it was a pretty comfortable defensive game for them. But it's against Drew Lock as a backup. And so it's certainly going from Lock to DeVito is a massive step down. And I think that DeVito run is well done. And we're going to see the Giants fade off in a big way. But this market's kind of adjusted to that. Like, you think about this, right? The Eagles lose in pretty heartbreaking fashion against the Seahawks on a game that everybody is watching. And despite that and everything that happened post-game, this number is not only adjusted up on the reopen, it's bet up immediately after it reopens. And so what I would have potentially expected to go the other way and kind of stay steady right around 10.5, 11 has gone the other way. Like, there's been interest in the Eagles. And so with how that lines up, I'm inclined to believe that you get that effort. But this kind of applies in the same logic to the Dallas game. Like, if Jalen Hurts was sick and not 100%, and there was further impact because these two teams shared the common opponent last week and both teams were hindered by the flu illness this week. If Dallas is getting a pass for that, which is kind of widely accepted with people I talk about, did the Eagles get a pass for that as well? So, yeah, again, like, it's Eagles or nothing, but how do you get into laying this big of a number? I don't know. Matthew says, are the Eagles playing well enough to cover a double-digit number? They seem a bit fraudulent as a team to me. I mean, they are, but the market is telling you otherwise. And so I think the Giants and DeVito are as big of a fraud as any in the NFL, that they're going to continue to slide there as well. So that stands out too to me. Final game on the board, fun one. Christmas Day evening, late slot. Ravens on the road at the San Francisco 49ers. San Francisco, a 5-point favorite across the board. Total in this game, 46.5. shaded to the over at Chris, shaded to the over at FanDuel, and Circa is already up to 47, one of the few 47s on the board. Opener was 45.5. The total has been bet up. So, two teams at the very peak of market ratings. Baltimore off a comfortable win against Jacksonville, where the defense showed out in a big way. Hamilton back. His importance to this team is significant. Really good defensive effort from Baltimore all around. They did, albeit, get some pretty good breaks within the red zone a few times against the Jags, but that's a good defensive unit. The Niners just continue to steamroll opponents, both sides of the football. This is not a paid endorsement from Rich, but Rich, you set me up perfect for it. Do you think San Francisco is 5 points better than all teams? So there was a tweet, I think 2 or 3 weeks ago, that came out where it was from a couple odds makers who said that they had the 49ers rated 5 points better than any other team in the NFL. And I did not agree with that sentiment. I thought that was too high. And we're now seeing kind of a reality in that, where this is at 5.5. It's not like it's like a gigantic home field bump for San Francisco. So it's like all of a sudden you're having, right now, standings wise, the best team in the AFC, essentially 4.5 points worse than the Niners on a neutral field. So like this is getting to a serious peak of pricing for San Francisco, as well as they are playing. The spot that I struggle with as I look at this and could say, I think for me, it's a Baltimore or nothing game, but I have no idea what you're getting from the Ravens offense on a week-to-week basis. And I especially have less of an idea now with Keaton Mitchell done for the season. I think that loss for him was enormous. And because he was really the last guy on the Ravens offense that had that explosive break a play at any time element to him. And now you take him out of the equation, and there's room like Melvin Gordon potentially I don't know where they go in this backfield to find that explosive punch. Lamar is certainly running more, which might be difficult to do against the 49ers defense that sits in this zone, is so good at defending running backs out of the backfield, is so good at defending tight ends. Likely has stepped in well in the absence of Andrews, but you take Likely out of this game, we haven't really seen like a clean, crisp passing game from the Ravens all season, where it's been all about the wide receivers. And like, I get OBJ is stepping in and stepping up, and he looks really good and is playing well as he becomes more of a focal point within this offense. But I don't really trust the Ravens offense at all on a week-to-week basis, especially without Andrews, especially without Mitchell, and especially probably here on the road against this Niners defense that I think can contain the runs from Lamar. To me, there's going to be kind of a big lack of an explosive element. And so I just, have a hard time with this one. Connor brings up a point from Fezzik on his pod. He said San Francisco 3.25 on a neutral against Baltimore. To me, that's a good number. And I think that sounds right. And it's right in line with market ratings. And to me, I just get here and I'm like, I think that this price is right. And I think that it's priced well. And if I wanted to advocate for this being peak San Francisco and get involved with the dog and the Ravens, the unit that I trust the least in this game is the Ravens offense. I know what I'm getting from the Niners offense. I know what I'm getting from the Niners defense. I know what I'm getting from the Ravens defense. I have no idea what I'm getting from the Ravens offense on a week-to-week basis, which really gives me a lot to sort of think about. And so, again, I hate to end the Christmas week preview show with so many of these games where it's like, well, it's this or nothing, but it's very likely to be nothing. I don't have a lot. Like the Chargers on the side, like the total over in Cleveland, Houston, like the Falcons. And then other than that, it's just kind of waiting and seeing how some of these numbers fall and where to go. And this week is just kind of late week NFL summed up in a kind of traditional sense, where it just becomes pretty tight down the stretch to find a lot. Mike D says MV Purdy going to end Lamar's MVP case this week. Tongue twister. Lamar Jackson doesn't have an MVP case. It's silly that he's up there now with the way that this game has trended. I get he's held the team together, but I don't see voters going for him in a season where there's a lot of other options to consider as well. I, Adam, have no thoughts on the head coach of the year market. I don't know. The problem with that is you're not handicapping performance per se. You're handicapping voters. And it's so hard to figure out what the voters are going to do, not only for MVP, but for the coach of the year market as well. That seems tough. I was listening to an NFL Insider show where they were advocating for Mahomes as the MVP. So a tough one all with that one in the head coach market for sure. Okay. Week 16 is wrapped up and done. I want to end with saying I hope everybody has a very Merry Christmas. Hope everyone has a fantastic holiday weekend. I hope time with family, friends, football, food is excellent for everybody as well. It's been a treat doing these each and every Wednesday, and the fact that these numbers keep going up week after week means a lot to me. And so I just want to say thank you to everybody who takes the time to tune into these. I hope that everybody is getting value from these and leading to make some decisions that they find useful on a weekly basis, potentially win some money from these as well. It's been a very good run on the service too, for those of you who subscribe to the NFL service, that we can hope to keep going. It's a light week. There's not a lot to get to, but I hope that even with having so many like indifferent opinions on a lot of these games, there was still something that you could take away and use from this preview. So again, thank you to everybody who has stopped by, contributed in the chat, left a thumbs up down below. If you subscribe to the channel as well, I really appreciate it too. Again, I'm very appreciative to be in a position to be able to do these shows, chat with each one of you on a weekly basis, and provide value for so many people now. 7,200 views on the show last week is pretty incredible to see these get up to where they are. So again, thank you very much for stopping by. Have a very happy holiday weekend. Enjoy the next few days, and we'll chat to you next Wednesday on the other side of the Christmas break.